Hey now, it's Sharon and I'm back to share another idea on how to reform the police. If you're new to the channel, I'm a retired detective. I worked for 20 years for Southeast Incident US, and I was also in the military. I'm sharing my ideas, thoughts, experiences, and my opinion on how we can better policing, retool policing, restructure policing. Some people say abolish. Even if you abolish the police, you're going to have to replace it with something. And most likely you're going to use individuals to do it. So I'm addressing it on an individual basis. And I'm providing my perspective, experience as a police officer, and what I went through in whistleblowing 2 times, and the ideas and events that helped me create a new perspective, if you will, on how we can do better in policing. So with that being said, I'm sharing this idea on officers being afraid of other officers. And that was true for me, just to a certain degree, and up to half my career, almost, just about. I was afraid of other officers. And what I mean by that is, there are scary officers. I talked about it. I talked about that in other videos. They're so scary that when they come on your scene, they mess things up or they escalate things. You don't want that officer there. You have the officer that you know on somewhat of a personal level because you see each other every day. You hear conversations and you know they're going through something, and you can tell that they're bringing that out to work with them in the field. You don't want those officers there. And they're honestly going through something, regular folks, you know. The other things that scare officers, higher ranked officers that are short-tempered, that cut corners, that you know they were probably scary officers on the street, that you know that when they were lower ranking, other officers didn't care for them or didn't want them on their scene. That was me to some degree, being afraid of that type of officer. What other officers were there? Oh, family members who are higher up and you're working with their family. That was scary to some degree because for me, you have to watch what you say because you don't know if they're bringing it back to the higher up. You also have to kind of be quiet if you see that individual, the family member, acting out or doing something they have no business doing, and you feel like they're being protected by their higher ranking family member. That's happened. Some of the practices and policies that I've seen in my old agency that protect higher ups, that's scary. I'll give you one example. I don't know if they still do it, but they did it while I was there. The higher ranking, when it was time for them to qualify, they all showed up on the range, maybe a couple of days in a row, but they shut the range down. You couldn't come to practice, you couldn't come on while they were qualifying. And then some of the stories you would hear out of there, like, you know, high ranking individuals, they're barely able to shoot or pass, which is not a problem, but it's a problem when you shut the range down and you don't allow anybody else to come on and practice or anything like that. And then you dog the lower ranks out for not coming to practice or barely qualifying or things like that. They dog you out, because that was me to some degree. They dog you out for barely qualifying. And in actuality, you were actually a good shooter if you could pass all 3, 2 out of the 3, 1 out of the 3, compared to other agencies anyway. But they made you feel like, hey, this is not good. You know, you need to do better and you need to come to practice. And it's interesting that they would close the range down for the high ranking. And then, like I said, the stories that you heard coming out of there, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. That's scary, because if we're all doing the same job and the requirements are the same, why are you shutting down the range for the high ranking? That's scary for the lower ranking officers. That's privilege that low ranking officers don't have. I don't think they looked at it like that. Maybe they did, who knows? What were the other things? Short-tempered officers, you could tell the ones that are short-tempered. and you don't want them on your scene, like I said, to escalate things. Officers that are known to lie in court. I've known a couple of officers like that where they've been caught 2 or 3 times lying in court, but they still have their gun and badge. At that time, I don't know what's going on now. That was scary. But I'll leave it at that. I gave you a bunch of things. And so officers are afraid of other officers. When I take a look at the other side of it, like what you hear in the news or in movies where officers are going after other officers, and you see this car parked outside your house, and I've never experienced that. The closest I've come to experiencing something like that for whistleblowing is, walking through the parking deck. I talked about that, and how you can see individuals when you look down at the ramps and stuff, them coming up. If you can see them, they can see you. And I would always notice that group would rev their engines and come flying past me. And all I do is just step in between cars. I wouldn't look back. I just make sure I'm not in the way. We don't want any accidents. So officers are afraid of other officers within the rank and file. There are policies, like I said, that are not practiced, and there are practices that are not policy. And one of them is that, they always talk about the gangs and not snitching, and snitches get stitches. It's the same mentality when I was policing. As an officer, you don't tell on other officers. You don't snitch. And I started to look at that differently in terms of my faith and what I was going through, and how it was a struggle to see things. And I'm like, oh my gosh, do I say something? Do I not say something? Because there are other officers, and all those things that I just described to you was weighing on me. That was part of it. When I first got in, I saw things and I justified it in my mind. And yeah, that's why this and blah, 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 this. And then I started to really look into myself and my faith and what I believed and how I was believing. And then it became a struggle to see things, and you're like, okay, what do I say something? Do I not say something? And there's been plenty of times where corners were cut and I just chose to be quiet. And I'm admitting that I just chose to be quiet. And then there were other times where I spoke up and I got retaliated against or ostracized, or my days off messed with, which hence making extra money. So I gave second jobs up in terms of making it a part of my daily living. So, because I looked at it as a chain, like you get the extra jobs, you're making all this money, it's lucrative. And then they could come by and say, well, did you like that extra job? That's a threat. So I didn't want that around my neck, so to speak. That's just my perspective. That's another thing that makes you afraid, the higher ups coming by and giving you these low-key threats on your money and things like that. So I cut that out. There's nothing for you to threaten me on. As long as I get 2 days off, it doesn't even have to be consecutive. As long as I'm getting paid as everybody else, that's how I fought some of the low accountability. But yeah, that's all I want to share with you. Officers are afraid of other officers. They may not say anything. And I'm not saying this is in every agency to the degree of we just got scary officers walking around. But sometimes it's so subtle, you don't even notice it until you actually have to go through it. So that's another share that I wanted to get out there. And I do have a plan. I wrote it out. It needs to be tweaked, but it can work. And I talk about it. I talk about some of the things I went through with whistleblowing in this book. I give you like 2 or 3 years worth of things that I actually thought and went through, and what I discovered about myself. And hopefully this can help others, not just in policing, in just any situation, any personal situation or job situation. And it's available on Amazon, and it's also available on lulu.com under the spirituality and reality, spiritual and religious tab on lulu.com or amazon.com. And with that being said, I'll talk to you guys next week. Take a look at our online store. The link is in the description. The links for that book will be in the description, both links. And as is our tradition, you don't necessarily have to go through a thing to learn from it. Talk to you guys later. Bye.